A continuación, tenemos la presentación de Marca País Australia Unlimited, cuya expositora es la señora Freya Campbell, que es directora de Marketing y Comunicaciones de Marca País Australia. También tenemos como moderador al señor Mirko Valleto, que es especialista en gestión de marca de PROM Perú. Por favor.
Bien, muy buenos días. Nuevamente bienvenidos. Vamos a continuar con las actividades en el marco del tercer foro de Marca País. Vamos a presentar a Freya Campbell. Ella es directora de Marketing y Comunicaciones de Marca País Australia, Australia Unlimited. La estrategia de posicionamiento de la marca Australia, además de promocionar su riqueza turística, también logra atraer la mirada a otros sectores como los negocios, la cultura, el diseño, el medio ambiente, la gastronomía, ciencia, sociedad, tecnología, entre muchas otras cosas más. A través de una promoción que integra sus fortalezas, podemos apreciar por qué Australia ocupa los primeros lugares en cuanto a su reputación a nivel mundial, según las cifras otorgadas por el Country Rep Track. La señora Freya Campbell nos va a dar mayores alcances sobre la marca País Australia. Por favor, recibámosla con un fuerte aplauso.
Is that better? Yeah. Great. First of all, it's lovely to be here. It's my first trip to South America, my first trip to Lima, and I'm coming back. And when I come back, I will speak Spanish. So unfortunately, I don't speak Spanish, so if you don't have a headset already, it might be a good idea to get one so you can understand my presentation. So my name's Freya Campbell, and I'm the Assistant General Manager of Marketing and Communications at the Australian Trade Commission. And 90% of the time, I love my job. I think I have a fantastic job. I get to work on the inaugural nation branding program for Australia, and part of my job is to tell people about the capability that Australia has and the direction that we're moving in. I managed the inaugural nation brand program when it started in Australia in 2010, and we had funding for 4 years. We've continued the program, but not with the level of funding, but it is still very much a priority for our government. Before working on my country brand, which was a significant honour, I worked on the first brand for the Emirate of Abu Dhabi, based in Abu Dhabi, and the city brand of Melbourne for 3 years as well, based in Melbourne. Both of which were fantastic experiences, but didn't really compare to working on Australia's First Nation brand. So I'm really honoured to be here with you today and share some insights from the Brand Australia program with you. So a lot of people ask, why would you bother branding a country? What's the point of branding a country? Everyone knows about Australia. They know we have kangaroos and they know we have koalas. What else do you need to know about Australia? Well, actually, if a country has a strong reputation, it also helps build political diplomacy. And there's many components to diplomacy. Australia at the moment is focusing on fashion diplomacy, which is relatively new, and also sports diplomacy. And I'm very interested to see in Peru that food diplomacy is new and it's something that the country is pursuing. Countries with positive reputations are also more likely to attract foreign direct investment and to be able to sell their goods. And this is all based on evidence. There is evidence that says very strongly that if your country has a strong reputation, you are more likely to be able to sell your goods and attract investment, as well as attract international students to study there and visitors to your country. So it's really important for a country to build a strong reputation. A country with a strong reputation is much more likely to fare better on the global stage. So the Building Brand Australia program was initiated in 2009. And before we started working on the program, we didn't just say, let's create a logo, let's brand Australia. We talked to consumers around the world about what they thought of Australia. And I wasn't surprised by the results. Does anyone in the audience know a brand, an Australian brand? No. That's because we don't really have that many well-known Australian brands. Foster's is one, Penfolds is another. We have a couple of wine and beer brands, but really we don't have the global brands that a lot of other countries have. So we conducted research in 14 different markets with 14,000 consumers. And some of the research was done in Brazil. That was one of the markets that we chose. And we really looked at how consumers in those markets perceived Australia. And there were some differences within some countries. In the US, for example, they did know more about Australia than Brazilians did. But they still didn't know much, and they really didn't know much about our intellectual capacity. So what the research showed was that Australia was known for its unique flora and fauna. So it's kangaroos, it's koalas, it's emus. We've got a great quality of life and we're very friendly, nice people. That was about it. It didn't tell us much more than that. We were not associated with businesses, technologies, brands or innovation, despite the fact that we actually have really great capability in all of those different attributes or fields. We're home to world-class scientific and academic institutions, and we have a lot of high-level research and development, particularly in the last 10 years. Probably really surprisingly is that Australia has 12 Nobel Prize winners just in the scientific fields. So no one knows about that. Even Australians aren't aware that we really are punching above our weight in that particular area. We're just not known for these attributes. So what we want to do is we want to change the way that we're perceived globally by telling global consumers, so people like you, about the people in Australia and some of the innovations that they've produced. And what that means is that we can actually be known for our kangaroos, but we can also be known for inventing Wi-Fi or Google Maps. So these are some Australian inventions, and I'm sure you didn't know that Australians had invented these. So we can't imagine a world without Wi-Fi or Google Maps. I used Google Maps when I was exploring Lima on Sunday. Wi-Fi, when we came in this morning, we were given the Wi-Fi password. So these are inventions that assist us every day, and Australians invented both of them. We also invented the bionic ear, and we're working on a bionic eye, the cervical cancer vaccine, and several other very high-profile innovations. But the point I'm trying to make is we really are not known for these. So even though our brand program had funding only for 4 years, we're continuing to invest in the program via content, and we subscribe to existing research, and we also commission research as part of brand tracking. Recently, for example, we commissioned research in 6 of the ASEAN markets in Southeast Asia because we wanted to know how consumers in those markets perceived our brands. Did consumers in Singapore know, for example, that Australia had good quality goods and services and quality education? Well, what we found was they actually knew we had very high quality education, but they didn't know our goods and services were of the quality that they are. And it was different with all the markets that we tested in ASEAN. So we're continually tracking our brand to see how it's perceived, and that way we can divert our funding and our resources into the areas where we do want to change people's perceptions. Recently, the Reputation Institute, in their 2015 survey, found that Australia ranked 5th out of 55 countries. We were behind Canada, Norway, Sweden and Switzerland. Now, those top 4 countries are always in the top four or five countries. It doesn't change much. And that's become known as their rightful place. So all of those countries are very well perceived across most attributes. For Australia, which is a smaller country, a middle power, to be ranked fifth is very powerful, and it's very positive for us as well. And again, we were ranked second for appealing environment, so the world knows that we are a beautiful country. 8th for effective government, but we didn't rank so well for our advanced economy, despite being the fact that we're the only country in the OECD who's just entered our 25th year of consecutive economic growth. So that's actually really significant. I think Peru has just entered its 18th year of consecutive economic growth, and our GDP has continued to grow for 25 years. But no one knows about that. It's also important to note that when I say most countries have a natural place, you can move within your place and you can regain your natural place, but it's quite difficult. So I'll give you an example. About 10 years ago, Denmark, which is always ranked in the top 10 countries in the world in most attributes or field, they ran a competition, and their competition was a competition about drawing the Prophet Muhammad. And those cartoons were published in the newspapers. And Denmark suffered because of that, and it's only been in the last couple of years that their brand ranking, their country brand ranking, has managed to climb back into the top 10. So it wasn't just Muslim countries that noted what Denmark had done. The rest of the world watched as well. And while they may not have said that they approved or disapproved, consumers generally noted that Denmark had done something that probably wasn't perceived well globally. So Denmark is now back in its natural place, but it took several years and it dropped several places. So the overarching objective of the Brand Australia strategy is to really position Australia as a global business partner and support increased economic prosperity through our global engagement. So we're using our people to tell those stories. We're trying to promote a much better understanding of Australia's commercial, intellectual and creative properties. We're not trying to buy more space in one area and not the others. As I said previously, we're trying to keep our image of nice, friendly people, but also tell the world that we have intellectual capacity that hasn't been known previously. And we want to present Australia in a consistent and contemporary way as well. So I note with the Peru logo, it is a very contemporary way to position the country. It stands out, it cuts through, and it doesn't rely on the traditional icons of a llama or an alpaca, for example. The same way the Australia Unlimited brand, which I'll show you shortly, doesn't actually feature a kangaroo. So the brand that you saw this morning with the kangaroo is our tourism brand, and that's done extremely well. It's very well received, but what we're trying to do with Australia Unlimited is move from the kangaroos and the koalas into the intellectual space as well. So I'll now show you a short video on what the Building Brand Australia program is trying to do. If you could please play the video. Thank you.
Introducing Brand Australia, which raises an immediate question. Is a country actually a brand? The short answer is yes, albeit a very complex one. A country's brand is based on reputation, history, geography, and personality. These reputations are developed over centuries and can be difficult to change. Our brand is not how we see ourselves, but how the rest of the world sees Australia. So, what do they really think about us? First, the good news. In a recent global survey of 52,000 people, Australia was ranked the second most popular country. The research revealed we're famous for our natural beauty and great lifestyle. We're also considered a responsible global citizen and a good place to do business. There is no bad news, but there is room for improvement. Australia is not so well recognised when it comes to technology, products, innovation and culture. You could say our beauty tends to overshadow our brains. Whatever the reality may be, that perception is the problem. Should we care what others think about us? Yes. A positive brand image can help grow trade, business and investment opportunities. It's not about winning a popularity contest. We've kind of won that one already. It's about building economic prosperity for the future. We can change perceptions by tapping into our greatest resource, our people. Our exporters, scientists, designers, educators, entrepreneurs, artists and humanitarians are shaping our engagement with the world. Their work is the best evidence we have of Australia's commercial, intellectual and creative credentials. We've created Australia Unlimited to promote the remarkable work of Australians at home and abroad. To share their stories, we've published magazine-style apps for iPhone and iPad. Download them free from the App Store to read about the activities of hundreds of extraordinary Australians. Australia Unlimited. Building brand Australia, one story at a time.
So this slide is very important. I think it's the most important slide in my presentation. It shows how globally consumers perceive Australia. So you can see Australia is up there in the top left-hand corner. We're near Brazil, but we're not really near many other countries. New Zealand's a little bit below us. They're in a more peaceful and harmonious space. We're in the vibrant area, so we're known with Brazil as this vibrant country. And there's good things about that. One of the great things is that the space we're in on this graph is pretty empty. So we own a very specific space. If you look down to the other side, on the right-hand side down the bottom, there's a lot of countries in that space. So Germany, China, Switzerland, Japan are all in the balanced area. So that's a very crowded space. But the thing that we want to do is we want to move our country or our brand footprint a little bit to the right, because a lot of the qualities that we're not known for, such as innovation, business, technology or brands, actually sit in the right. So that means that Germany is known for its innovation, which we already know, but it also means that Switzerland is known for its brands. And when you think watches, you think Switzerland. But when you think Australia, you think, yes, great, lovely country, very vibrant, nice global player, but nothing really special. So we're differentiated, we're in that quadrant with Brazil. We've got an engaging personality and we're admired for our lifestyle. We're sort of the dumb blonde. I don't know if you say that in South America. We're the dumb blonde, we're the life of the party, but we're not known for our intellect. And that doesn't assist us in being perceived as an innovative economy. So this is actually what we want to do. We want to move our brand footprint to the right. And that means we can keep our vibrancy, but we also increase some of those intellectual attributes which sit on the other side of the chart. Now this research was done with 14,000 consumers, and as I said, different countries perceived us differently, but overwhelmingly we were this good old nice Australia, but a bit blonde and not known for our intellectual capacity. So we can stretch our brand footprint, we can move it a little bit, and we can do this by promoting some of the more serious attributes that we're not known for. For example, the Nobel Prize winners. And countries in that assertive space are more likely to be known by some of those attributes, like education, business brands and technology. So by telling these stories, we will increase the serious side of what Australia is, but we won't lose our vibrancy. The kangaroo we saw previously is the logo for tourism, and it's done a fantastic job. It's really helped position Australia as one of the most desirable countries for consumers to visit on a global basis. Unfortunately, that purchase cycle is slow because Australia is far away, and the desire doesn't necessarily translate to the propensity to visit. But Tourism Australia are doing a fantastic job on that. What Australia Unlimited is, it's more about the other qualities. It's the nation as a whole, not just the tourism. So it's not just the kangaroo, it's everything else. And it's being forged through this enterprising spirit that Australians have. And that's, again, something that comes up in the research. We're known for the way we do things and the way we do things a little bit differently. And Australia Unlimited was developed to be used a little bit more broadly and with other government brands and with the private sector as well. We've developed a whole lot of tools and resources to support the brand. We continually, as I said previously, do brand tracking and research, international PR and advertising in key markets or in markets where a particular attribute is important. And we really promote our content through digital and social media. We try and do things a little bit differently. For example, my team in Australia, when we launched the brand, we created the first government app in Australia, which was quite significant 5 years ago. Yesterday in Indonesia, our minister launched Periscope, which is a new social media platform. So again, we were the first agency to do that. And these are small things, but it also shows that we are trying to do things differently and we're not just doing things the same way all the time. So this is our visual identity. And I think a visual identity is extremely important, but I don't think a country's brand is just its visual identity or its logo. And that's the perception that a lot of people that's a trap that a lot of people fall into. They think that consistently applying a visual identity is enough and they don't have to work at changing the perception. So we've got a lot of assets here. You can see the Australia Unlimited logo is based on it's a stylised map of Australia. And again, this was tested in 14 different markets. It translates very well, particularly into markets into languages like Mandarin. And the yellow and the orange tested really well in the Asian markets. So blue and green didn't test well in Asia, and that was really important for us because our largest trading partners and our economic prosperity, it really is in Asia as we're part of the Asia Pacific. The audience is extremely important as well, and I think a lot of countries forget this when they set up a nation brand. They think everyone is their audience, and they're right to an extent. Global consumers are certainly very important, as are international decision makers, and we say C-suite executives are probably the most important component of our audience. There's also significant value in Australians living abroad. So they're the Australians who are expats or living in other countries, and they're telling the stories as well. And with social media, as easy as it is now, those stories are available on most digital and social platforms to share. We have a website, australiaunlimited.com, and we publish a couple of stories every week. We've got over 450 stories published on the site at the moment in main categories such as business, culture and design, and we're always looking for new stories or a unique angle to an Australian story. And we use those stories and promote them on digital channels in the relevant markets. They're available for everyone to share as well. So that's the website, that's australiaunlimited.com, and as you can see, a couple of different stories every week there. We like to share our good news on Facebook, Twitter or LinkedIn. And again, we don't have a blanket approach or a global approach. It depends what works in the particular market. So we're very active in Indonesia. As I said, we launched Periscope in Jakarta yesterday. And Twitter is extremely important in Jakarta. Jakarta is actually the Twitter capital of the world. So we make sure that in that market, we are telling stories on a regular basis that are relevant to the audience. We've got over 10,000 followers across our various social media platforms, and that's about an estimated reach of 150,000, and it's growing quite significantly. We use campaigns to tell stories as well. So Australia Day is the 26th of January, and this year in Australia Day we focused on food. We have some fantastic Australian chefs, and we got some really high-profile interviews of some of these chefs. Chefs such as Curtis Stone, George Columbaris, who you probably don't know about, but they are well known in Australia, and there are Asian markets that they're quite well known in too. And we really promoted food and consumable goods via Australia Unlimited. And this got a lot of uptake globally because everyone's interested in food. We also look at the youth. So we ran a Future Chasers campaign earlier this year, which was very successful. It was actually the most successful campaign that we've run. And we focused on 19 Australians, 19 young Australians, and their stories, their unique stories. Out of the 19, we chose 4 who had studied in Australia but had returned to their home country, who all had a different story to tell. So we chose a Sri Lankan, an Indonesian, a Malaysian and an Indian who had studied in Australia previously and then gone back to their country and had done something quite unique or amazing. This campaign was very well received, and I think the main reason is it was youth focused. So it wasn't just telling old people's stories, it was telling the new stories and the new innovations as they were coming through. We try and promote Australian capability and innovation in different ways. So this is Australia House in London, and we had really significant window displays on Australia House for a couple of months. And again, we featured different Australians that you wouldn't expect to see. So this particular shot shows a young lady by the name of Melanie Perkins from Canva Designs, which is an online graphic design platform that she established. And she's doing extremely well. We're doing a similar project in Mexico in the next couple of months, where we're promoting Australian innovations in a very public place in the Australian Embassy in Mexico. We're also quite flexible with our brand. So at first when we set it up, we were not flexible at all. Most of my agency didn't like working with me because I was always telling them, no, you can't do this, you can't do that. It needs to be yellow, it must be orange. We've become a little bit more flexible, partly because we've had a bit of cut through with the logo, but also because we're responding to the market. So this particular slide shows Australia Business Week in India, which our minister led a delegation of 350 companies about a year ago, in January this year actually. So we tried to adapt the brand a little bit to fit more in India. So you can see the colours are slightly different. We've gone with pink themes throughout. Just responding to the market a little bit, but still showing Australia Unlimited and still showing Australian capability. We call it the Rise, so it's the horizon. And you can see it fits well within India. And lots of different applications. So we had ties, we had scarves, so we were immediately identifiable as Australian. So promoting our country and our capability consistently. Another really interesting thing we've done with Australia Unlimited is we've expanded it into a sub-brand, Future Unlimited. And Future Unlimited is our education brand. It used to be known as Study in Australia, but it was a bit old and we thought we might as well make it a bit more contemporary and align it with Australia Unlimited. So this is Future Unlimited and it specifically targets the student market. And we license Future Unlimited to educations. So Sydney University, for example, has a licence to use Future Unlimited and they attach it when they're recruiting students or advertising in international markets. It's been extremely successful. It's in 35 different countries at the moment and we've licensed about 300 different licences. So it's very well received. And we're looking at this all the time. We're updating photos and imagery to represent Future Unlimited at the same time that we're looking at Australia Unlimited. And one of the other categories we're looking at the moment in setting up a sub-brand for is food. So food and agri products, extremely important exports for Australia. and we're looking at the consistency of a food and agri brand. Maybe it'll be something along the lines of unlimited, or perhaps it won't be, but it's something that the government's looking at now. And that slide just shows the brand in activation. So again, there is consistency. Same colour palette, for example, slightly different font, a little bit more modern to appeal more to students, but a lot of similarities with Australia Unlimited. I think the key to success for us has been we've had high-level support within Australia, but unfortunately the brand hasn't been mandated. I'm going to talk about the GREAT campaign shortly, Britain's campaign, and that has been mandated with different success. So I think a government mandate really does help with success for a nation brand and remaining relevant to your target audience. So looking at your audience and looking at how they want to consume information and what sort of stories they're interested in as well. Continually adapting new technologies and channels to amplify the brand. So we got rid of the app. I was so proud that we'd created this app in 2010. We got rid of it 2 years ago because it was meaningless. It had been overtaken by different platforms. So we're continuing to adapt and change. We're also, one of the things I think we do particularly well is we continue to invest in brand and tracking research. So we know how Australia is perceived, and we will commission research in individual markets if we need to. So I mentioned the ASEAN markets in South Asia that we commissioned some research in earlier this year. Next year we're looking at China, Korea and Japan, and we're looking at the products that we've had tariff eliminations for under free trade agreements, the propensity for consumers to buy those products. So we're really looking at how consumers view us and some of our exports. I'll move on to some other successful destination brands, and I mentioned GREAT previously. I think it's a fantastic brand. It was introduced for the London 2012 Olympics, and I think the biggest trick to its success is it was mandated across all agencies within the UK and all embassies and consulates. And agencies who didn't use it actually had to show cause to the Prime Minister's office as to why they weren't using it. They've adapted it really well across sectors, so technology is great. Recently there was a design fair in Australia. Design is great, and entrepreneurs are great. So it's something that's worked very well. And as I said, I think the main reason is it's been mandated at the highest level and agencies don't have a choice. They have to use it. They also like it because the assets work very well. Probably my personal favourite country brand is Sweden. And I think Sweden they're real innovators and they have been for a long time. And they've managed to change the way that they're perceived, but keep some of the attributes for which they're known for. So Sweden, about 10 years ago, did extensive research and they found that they were known for ABBA. ABBA is still very well known. Some of their cars, so Volvo and Saab, again well known. And probably one of the most famous consumer brands is IKEA. So they had these great brands for which their country was known. But they knew the future was in technology. So their government invested a lot of money in technology. And as a result of that, modern inventions that we use every day, Minecraft, Spotify and Skype, are all Swedish inventions. So that's an example of a really small country that has looked at how the world is changing and what's important to people, and they've managed to adapt themselves very well, which is a great thing when you consider that production of cars in Sweden isn't what it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So they've really needed to diversify. I think they've done a very good job of doing it. Some other successful nation brands. New Zealand has done a fantastic job. And what they've done, they've really focused on one attribute, and that's this perception that New Zealand is clean. It doesn't matter if New Zealand's clean or not. It is clean, but it doesn't matter if it's not because globally everyone thinks it's clean. So they've really used that to their advantage. The 100% Pure campaign was created just for tourism, but has been extended to other sectors. and as well the silver fern really reinforces that image of a clean and pure country. And they've taken that into other fields as well. For example, their films, the Lord of the Rings films, again show this clean, beautiful scenery, which fits very well with their brand. Meat and dairy are two of their, well, lamb in particular, two of their exports, and again, fits the clean image. Abu Dhabi is one of my favourite stories, possibly because I worked there for a couple of years helping them with their brand. But they have a really interesting story. In 2001, when September 11 happened and the planes went into the Twin Towers, there was a lot of media that Emiratis from Abu Dhabi were responsible for those attacks. Now, they actually weren't. They had nothing to do with it, but it didn't matter. Globally, people thought that people from Abu Dhabi were involved in those attacks. So the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi decided it was really time to set up a brand, not just a logo, but a nation brand, and differentiate his emirate from the other emirates in the UAE, but also present it a little bit differently. So that's what they did. They built an airline. They created Etihad, which turned 8 last year. So they built an airline. They built all these stadiums. They're building the only Louvre outside of Paris. The next Guggenheim is in Abu Dhabi. So they were also lucky because they're one of the richest places in the world and they had all these money to do these things, but they really did try and move themselves away from that perception of terrorists, which wasn't true, and they also wanted to move themselves away from Dubai with this ritzy lifestyle. They wanted to have more of a cultural persona, which they've done very well. City brands are also really important, and often it's the second cities of a country which need to focus more on branding. So in Australia, Canberra is the capital. No one knows Canberra is the capital. Everyone thinks it's Sydney, which is our biggest city. But Melbourne is our second biggest city, and Melbourne's really had to fight to be perceived as a global city. So Melbourne has created its own identity through very different mechanisms, and one of the things they've done is used broadcast opportunities. So some of the biggest sporting events in the Asia Pacific and in the world are in Melbourne, and they've really relied on that broadcast. So the Melbourne brand mark that you see here on the tennis court at the Australian Open is broadcast globally. The brand mark is also above the gantry, the gate at the Formula One, and it's on the racing ground at the Melbourne Cup, which is one of the biggest horse races in the world. So they've done a really good job at setting themselves up as a global city, but also differentiating themselves a little bit from Sydney. Edinburgh's another example. When you think of the UK and famous cities, you think of London automatically. And Edinburgh has done a fantastic job of setting itself up as different to London, not as important on a global scale from a business perspective, but it has things that are unique to Edinburgh, and it's really focused on some of the arts and creativity with things like comedy and festivals to differentiate itself, and it's done a very good job of it. Like Australia, Edinburgh continually invests in brand tracking research as well, just to check that they're on track and to make sure that the money they're spending in changing the perception is actually working. I think I've lost a slide. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was Peru. And I've only been here for 3 days, so I don't have that much to say. Oh, no. Not yet. Thank you. So if I can talk a little bit about Peru first. I've only been here since Saturday, and I'm so amazed by what the country is, even just Lima, the little bit that I've seen. But when I thought of Peru before I came here, I thought of Machu Picchu, I thought of Cusco, but I didn't know much else. And I read frantically in the last month before I came, but I really didn't know a lot about it. I'd heard the food was good, but I did think, how good can beans and rice be? I didn't realise that you had this amazing fusion with Japanese and Chinese food, and that it's created this really unique cuisine, which is incredibly competitive on a global scale. I had lunch yesterday at Maido, which I understand is the 44th ranked restaurant in the world, and it was amazing. And I couldn't believe I was in Lima and having that sort of cuisine. I didn't know how strong the economy was. I knew that copper was important and gold and silver, but I didn't know much else about it. So I think there's a great story for Peru to tell. I love the logo. I think visually it works really well, using the Nazca lines and the moray and transferring that into the P for Peru, I think is just so intelligent and contemporary, and it just tells such an obvious story. And the easy thing, I think, to do would have been to have a logo that showed a llama or an alpaca, but you're not positioning yourselves as this competitive contemporary country if you go back to what everyone knows. So I think it was a very adventurous and brave thing to do, and I think it's worked extremely well. And then my last point was, what about Paddington Bear? Because when I was coming to Peru, I said to my niece, who's 5, I'm going to Peru. And she said, that's where Paddington Bear's from. And I said, no, Paddington Bear is from London, not from Peru. And her older sister said, no, Freya, Paddington Bear is from the jungle in Peru. And I'd forgotten that. So I think Paddington Bear is a great example of a brand ambassador who might be sitting right in front of you, but who you may not have thought of as this obvious choice. So I'll finish with a video that we've just produced on Australia Unlimited. We launched it yesterday in Jakarta. Our minister launched it, and it really does show contemporary modern Australia and all the different capabilities that we're very proud of. Thank you very much. As I said, it's a great honour to be here, and I really enjoyed both preparing this presentation and presenting it, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.